All right. Okay. I think this is a good spot. So greetings, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to our webinar event titled Export Compliance 101. I have an export license. Now what? We are glad that you've taken time out of your day to join us to get some good information. My name is Shariah Johnson. I, along with Tom Dustman, are the co-chairs of the National DEX Education and Outreach Committee, and I have the pleasure of introducing our presenter for today, who is going to walk us through what to do after you get that export license. But before I introduce her, a couple of housekeeping measures. First, if you can make sure that you keep your lines on mute. I think we muted them, but just in case, just keep them muted to avoid any background noise or distraction during the presentation. And in addition, if you have any questions during the presentation, we ask that you put them into the Q&A function that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. So with that said, our presenter for today is Mariana Rutherford. Mariana is the COO of Kios, an international trade company, and the Supply Chain Export Compliance Director of AirTech Inc., a company that modifies and operates jet, turboprop, fixed, and rotary wing aircraft to deliver critical airborne services to government and science customers. Mariana is well known in the international trade industry for her expertise in international traffic and arms regulations and export administration regulations licensing, as well as international business trade development. Mariana is a U.S. dual citizen born in Mexico and has been in the U.S. in Southern Maryland for 14 years. She has an MBA with a specialty in leadership and is a certified professional in ITAR export compliance. Mariana is also a member of the Maryland DC DEC and part of the educational committee of the National DEC. She's also a member of the Maryland, Jalisco, Mexico sister states, where she had the role of vice chair and was able to find and coordinate the means to donate an ambulance and 3 trucks filled with medical and school equipment to the state of Tamaulipas in Mexico. So with that said, I will now pass it over to our presenter for today, Mariana.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I will start sharing my screen. Okay. Okay. Are we good? Can everybody see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm happy to be talking a little bit about export compliance with everybody. That is a subject that we can keep learning every single day with new things that happen, right? So I will take, if anybody has any questions, just please put in the Q&A, and if Shariah will interrupt me, or I don't mind, I prefer to address it at the moment. Or if you want to wait until the Q&A at the end, that is fine. And you will have my email information, and my phone number is going to be standing on the last slide. And if anybody has any questions or want to get a little bit more into any subject. And I want to thank the National DEC for organizing these webinars, because we all have something to learn in these ones, and everybody has a different knowledge, and it's great that everybody else is willing to share. With that,
Mariana,
yes.
Mariana, this is Tom Dustman. Just a little bit of an administrative issue. Can you go to the full screen for your presentation, your slides?
I am on the full screen.
Okay, we had one question to try to be able to get to full screen.
The slides are a small format. I'm not sure how to, I put them in the presentation. Can everybody else see them well?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. Yeah, I have them full screen. I'm on my laptop, so I don't have different screens to figure it out. Yeah, somebody else said I can. Thank you, Mark. So, okay, then I will start and continue. So we have a license, now what? I want to go over a couple subjects before we have a license, because I know usually, personally speaking, when I join a webinar or something, there's the main subject, but sometimes I want to know how we got there. So I would like to make sure that everybody here is in the same page and that we can talk about all the background a little bit to get it to a license, and then what needs to get done after the license. So we're going to talk about what is an export, the difference between ITAR, EAR. A lot of people are like, well, ITAR, I need a license, but what is EAR? Well, sometimes you do need a license, so we'll get there too. There are different agencies that govern the US exports, and we're going to talk a little bit about those. We're going to see how we would go into applying for a license. And each subject I'm gonna go over very superficial. So if somebody wants to get into one subject specific and you guys want me to touch more into that subject, perhaps I would like to hear from you. So if you guys put in the chat or in the Q&A, hey, we would like to hear about more this specific subject, perhaps we can do another webinar in a couple of months and focus on that. So we will take, or I will personally love to hear any comments or suggestions that you might have. Okay, then we made it to, I have my license. Now what? And these are the steps that we're gonna have to be working on in order to proceed. And the last point is gonna be the Q&A. With that, we have here the 3 different agencies or different things that you usually hear: OFAC, ITAR, and EAR. But let's continue. So what is an export? I don't know, and I'm sure a lot of people here know what an export is, but sometimes I hear, and that's why I want to talk about this. An export is when something is going out, right? But that does not mean that just taking, let's say, my laptop or taking an ITAR control equipment out of the country. That means also some foreigner person coming into our office or visiting with us and seeing control items and getting into details. So as we see here, written says oral, written, electronic, visual disclosure, or technology. I've had clients that they are sending drawings back and forth to the office next door, but it happens that the server is in a different country. Guess what? You need to be aware of that, because when you're sending an email to the office next door to your coworker that is, you're American, your coworker is American, but you're sending the information through a server that is out of the country, that is an export. Now, is that export needs to be licensable or not? That's a different story. But we do make sure that we understand that when we share with anybody that is outside of the United States something, it's an export. When a foreign person comes into the United States and we talk about different things, it's an export. Now, again, not all the exports are going to be licensable, but we need to identify what is licensable, what we need to worry about, and what we need to pay a little bit more attention to make sure that we have the proper licenses. or if we're not going to use a license, to be able to use an exception or an exemption. So what is the difference between ITAR and EAR? ITAR is going to talk about defense articles, defense services, and anything that is listed in the United States munitions list. What is that? Usually when you see an aircraft, it could be a commercial or it could be military, right? Well, if it's on the munition, in the USML, which is like, it could be a military aircraft, then it's going to be controlled by ITAR. If it's going to be military grade technology, or if you're going to be providing services to the government, that is going to be defense services. And again, I'm not going to touch much on the descriptions of what it is, each thing, because I want to get to what to do after. However, and if at the end we have time, we can talk a little bit more of a specific subject, or we can have another webinar for that. So the difference, ITAR has defense articles, EAR has the commercial items and some technologies. There is a dual use items and technologies that sometimes is, for example, if you install toilet on a military grade aircraft. Well, the military aircraft, it is fully ITAR controlled. However, if you just need to ship that part, the specific part, or tires, or O-rings, or something directly for that specific aircraft, that is controlled by the EAR. So we need to make sure that we identify what we are trying to send, and always start looking at the USML. If it's not listed in the USML, then we go to the Commerce Control list, which is where we will find anything that it's EAR. So I put some different pictures here on different knives. One is a butter knife, and the other one is a military knife. If you see, both are knives, but they're way different, right? So the same happens with anything that we want to use or export. Like, we have some normal binoculars that you can use just for fishing, or you have night vision binoculars or goggles that you can use for military use. So definitely we need to understand our product that we want to export or talk about with other people or technology in order to know where it belongs to. So which agencies govern the US exports? We have Department of State that controls sensitive military equipment and technology and certain other items. We have the Department of Commerce that controls some less sensitive military equipment and dual use. I don't know if you guys have heard of, they call the 600 series, because the ECCNs, which is the export control number, export classification control number, or
export control classification number.
Yes, thanks. So the format of the ECCN, it's always a number, then a letter, and then 3 digits. So when we talk about 600 series, it's because those 3 digits, it starts with a 6, 610, 600, 6, any other thing. So when somebody says, yes, it's EAR, but it's under the 600 series, is because there were many items that they were transferred from the ITAR to the EAR, from the USML to the CCL. And we need to be aware, because usually those items are more controlled, and we will need to get licenses in order to export them, even though they are on the Commerce Control list. And then we have the OFAC, which is for economic sanctions and embargo regulations. So agencies that govern the US exports. I put a little bit of like an org chart here because it's sometimes confusing to talk about what is ITAR, or they say, well, they said, is it ITAR or is USML? Or they say, is EAR or ECCN? And I wanted to make sure that we identify that when we talk about ITAR, USML, and ITAR category is all in the same, within the same area. When we talk about EAR, CCL, and ECCN, we are also talking about same area. So how do we apply for an export license? As you can see, we have same comparison side by side, right? When we talk about Department of Defense, DDTC, when we talk about Department of Commerce, BIS. Then we talk about ITAR with the EAR, or the US munitions list with the commerce control list. And the categories, what are they called? If it's ITAR control, then it's gonna be ITAR category, I believe. If not, somebody correct me. And if it's EAR, it's an ECCN. Where or how we apply to either or? DEX is the system that it's used for anything that is ITAR related. SNAPR is the one that it's used for anything that is EAR. So DEX stands for Defense Export Control and Compliance System. So if you wanna register, if you wanna request a commodity classification, commodity jurisdiction, if you wanna do anything that might be ITAR, you need to go through DEX. DEX is a system that you register, and you also have to have double verification that not many people is aware of, which is Okta Verify, and you need to go through certain things in order to be able to use it. Also, if you're going to be handling licensing through DEX, or you need ITAR licenses, you need to be registered with the State Department, and that registration, it's usually $22.50, if I'm not mistaken, the number, it has not changed. And that number changes if you have many more licenses. It escalates a little bit. With the SNAPR for EAR licenses, this is a free software, and you don't have to pay for any licenses you have. Also, the difference is on DEX, you can add a third party as a drafter. For example, Kios, our company, we have different clients that we help to draft licenses, and we go into their account and everything and work with them in order to draft the license that they need. But at the end of the day, they are the ones in charge of submitting for the license and making sure that all the information provided to the State Department is correct, and it's exactly what they need, what they need the license for. On the EAR side, you can draft yourself your license if you want to and know how to, or want to figure it out, or you can have a third party file it for you, which that's also what we do with many clients. We file under our account. So that's something that you cannot do on DEX. DEX, you have to, the company or the person that is requesting the license, they need to be the ones signing the license and submitting. On a SNAPR, a third party can get it for you. So we have a license. Now what? That's the question. I used to be focused more in drafting licenses and focusing on having the commodity jurisdiction and making sure that if somebody would bring me a product, I would help them classify their product with the right information. But I remember the first time that I started in a different place and I needed to start using the license and continue. And I remember, well, every time I went to an export compliance webinar or training or anything, we focused on the how to get the licenses, but not the aftermath, what needs to get done and what needs to happen. So that's why I wanted to touch a little bit more into that. So first of all, even getting my license or not, if I don't need a license, because there are certain things that no license are required, or you can use with BIS, you can use an exception, or with ITAR, you can use an exemption. But we always have to identify the what am I sending? When do I need to send? We need to make sure that we understand that and we keep it clear to us and to our full company, because sometimes ITAR licenses, not sometimes, it usually ITAR licenses take at least 2 months. So when we're gonna be shipping something that will be ITAR controlled, we need to put that time into consideration. When we need to do it, where are we gonna send it? Which country to start with, right? There are many countries that they're friends with the US, some others that they are not so friendly with the US. So the US wants to know that special military grade technology or product that you will be shipping. They want to know who will be handling it and what for. So we will need to be able to identify what you're sending, when you're sending it, where is it going, who is going to be the person responsible, and why you're sending it. I cannot just apply for a license to send firearms to Colombia just because I feel like doing it. I need to have a contract. I need to specify which kind of contract. I need to identify, this is my client, this is the reason why they want it. I need to prove that I'm legit and my client is legit. Because guess what? If we cannot prove that, we're not gonna get the license granted. So once we know what we're sending and everything, we need to identify, right? Do I need a license to export this product or technology? Usually, bigger companies have an export compliance department. Smaller and medium companies don't need to have an export compliance department. Usually have a consultant to guide them when they need, because sometimes it's just one-time license that they need, and that license lasts for 4 years, or depends when they need to do. So we need to identify, do I need a license? Then, as we talked, we apply for the license or the exemption, or no license if not needed. And once we're ready to go, we need to have either commercial invoice or pro forma invoice. What are those? We're going to be talking about, and I'm going to have an example of a pro forma invoice, but basically the commercial invoice is going to have everything that you need to know about the product that you're exporting. Who is sending it, who is receiving it, when, cost of the product, serial numbers, part numbers, everything that is going to identify it. And we need to have that. And the commercial usually is when you're selling something. So if somebody buys this product from me and I want to ship it to France, then I'm going to be creating the commercial invoice to add all those extra things that we need to have, rather than just the normal invoice that you would get if you're not exporting something. A pro forma invoice is more when you own the product and you want to ship to yourself to another, let's say you have a contract, you're a government contractor or something, and you have a contract in a different country, and you want to ship parts for something that you are using in that country or that they need, and you're shipping it from your company to yourself in a different country. You're not selling anything. You just need that part in order to continue with whatever contract you're doing. Then we would use a pro forma invoice in that regard. So once we put everything on the pro forma invoice and then we have everything that we need to send, we're gonna put their weights and dimensions and all the export control classifications and HTS codes and everything in there. Then we're gonna see the cost, because many times we worry about, okay, I have this little gadget that it's $25,000. No problem, I'm just gonna call FedEx and send it to Colombia. Well, guess what? When you send something to Colombia that is more than, I don't recall the numbers because different countries have different ones and I've been dealing with different. I think it's when it's more than $2,000 of value, you need to have an importer of record. So you cannot just send it to your person that went from your company and travel in advance and then you shipped it. You need to have a specific person in there. So sometimes it's better when it's your first time on where you're dealing with things that you don't know exactly everything. You need to identify who your freight forwarder is, and sometimes you do need a broker. So it's important that you pay attention to all these details, because it's important to know not just how to take your equipment out of the country, but you need to make sure that it also can be received in the other country. The other country can be imported, so it doesn't stay in customs for months. And this is obviously only with physical things. When you're exporting technology, you will definitely not need a freight forwarder or a broker, nor a commercial invoice or pro forma invoice, but you still need to go through numbers, steps 1 to 3, knowing if you need a license or not. Here we have also identify, well, I already talked about this, which country we're talking about, because each country has their own rules and regulations. And what you can export to Spain, that does not mean you can export the same thing or the same way to Panama. So, or let's say I've heard, if you want to export to Brazil, you need to take many other things in considerations, because their rules and regulations are not totally clear on the written side. So I have not exported directly to Brazil just yet, but every time that I call freight forwarder to send something, usually is, are you sending to Brazil? No. Okay, then we can follow the normal rules. So it's, and then I'm just mentioning because, again, each country has their own things, and you just need to be aware what's happening and how to make sure that your things arrive to wherever you need them on time and good.
And Mariana, I was just going to add too, like, for, as you mentioned, importer of record, and that's an issue sometimes with certain countries where you can't be the importer of record if you don't already have an entity already in that country. So those rules kind of vary as well.
Correct. So it's very important, especially if you're sending stuff to yourself in a different country. If you're sending to somebody else that it's already established in that country, usually they have already their taxes and everything, which is what they need to be an importer of record, and they're registered. But if you're sending to somebody that is not registered with that country, then it's definitely something that you need to pay attention in advance, not just worry about your ITAR license or your EAR license, to make sure that your product goes from A to B without any problems. Thanks, Ryan. So I have number 7, report the export through the AES, Automated Export System. What is that? That is how the US records all the exports that they are happening. It also helps with the license control. If you have a license number, it used to be more paper and there wasn't specific ways or easier ways to keep track on how much you have sent within a license. Let's say I have a license for sending 10 engines, aircraft engines to, let's say, Costa Rica. And on my license, that is for 10 engines, I export one at a time. When you report on the AES that you're exporting that engine using that license, it helps you decrement. So the next time that you want to use it, instead of having still your 10 engines, you're going to have only 9 left. So you also need to be aware on how to file this AES, because it's sometimes could be a little iffy if you don't know what you're doing, and if you report the full license or the 10 engines and then your license is expired just because you had an error on the filing, and then I assume you can call back to the automated export and do a whole thing to fix it. But I just want to make sure that everybody's aware, and we're going to talk also about what you need to do or when you file an AES. So record keeping, we need to keep everything that it's related to the export that we're going to be doing for 5 years. It doesn't matter if there was an emails, if there were expenses, if they were any information that we need to keep, that it's gonna help us identify when we get an audit. Why was this sent to who, to where, when, and what was it? And we need to be able to identify the reasonings and everything that we send, and how. If we use a license, if we use an exemption, then we need to keep a record on how we did it, so we can have the full how do you call it, the full export recorded. So it's important to keep the records at least 5 years.
Hey, Mariana, we have a question. Do you have advice on translating materials for export compliance? It is important to have materials professionally translated and not just Google Translate, correct?
Yes, because Google Translate is good, but sometimes the little word that it changes the whole meaning of what you're trying to say. So it is important to make sure, specifically the commercial invoices or the pro forma invoices. And thank you for that question, because sometimes you send all your paperwork in English and then it arrives in a Spanish-speaking country and they don't not necessarily know everything that is in there. So you might want to back up and make sure that if you're going to be dealing with other countries and exporting to that everybody will be able to understand what you're sending. And if you're going to be having a contract or something, I would suggest you double check with somebody, not just trust the Google Translate, because I've had a couple different times that Google translates and then I read it. For example, I usually identify and verify that the translations are done correctly from English to Spanish or Spanish to English. And I usually find different words that I'm like, what are they trying to say? Like I read in Spanish and it does not make sense to me. And then I read in English And I was like, oh, they were trying to translate, but it translated literally, and not everything translates literally when it gets out of context.
And Mariana, isn't it true that a freight forwarder could help with some of the translations on documents as well?
It depends on the freight forwarder. I'm sure you can check with each freight forwarder. I would say it depends on who you are dealing with.
Okay.
We as a consultants offer that, just because I have a couple Spanish-speaking consultants on my team, but not everybody does that. So I would say check with your freight forwarder or whoever you're dealing with to make sure that you have all your I's dotted and your T's crossed. And I hope that's the correct way to say it, because English is my second language. So a little bit more consolidated in here. We need to identify the 5 W's, check if we have a license, make sure we have the commercial or the pro forma invoice, make sure whoever we are using as a freight forwarder or broker has all your information with time. And I'm gonna say in here on the freight forwarder, we need to think ahead on when we're drafting a license, because when we ship something, I have some clients that they send personal protective equipment with the person hand carrying that equipment into theater. However, there has been sometimes they need to return that equipment via commercial shipping because they had to come back on time or for a different reason on a commercial flight, or they could not make it back, unfortunately, or something. So in order for that equipment to come back to the US under that license, that freight forwarder needs to be in that license. And you might think, well, I don't know if that is gonna happen, or I don't know if I'm gonna need a freight forwarder or not. What I usually suggest on that regard is add as many freight forwarders you can think that you could use. And if you're dealing with a different country and you think that equipment or what you're sending is gonna come back, I would contact a couple local freight forwarders, and I would add FedEx, DHL, UPS, and any of the normal shipping companies that you might use or somebody might use to send something, just in case you need to ship anything from that license, because whatever reason. So you are protected. Now, if you already drafted your license and after that you do need to add a freight forwarder, there's no problem. You can always add, if it's something that is going and coming back on a DSP 73, you can always file for a DSP 74 to add a freight forwarder. So then once you have make sure that you can ship and everything, then you're gonna do the AES, your automated export system filing. That, I believe FedEx and UPS have a little click that you put on, and it says file for me this AES, or you can have your account filing it for you. Like, you can have somebody in your office to open an account within the AES system. It's called ACE, the system, the free system to file it, and you can file your own if you don't want FedEx or UPS or whoever filing it for you. So that is something to think about, who will be filing that for you, because you need to. It's kind of like recording. You have a license, that's great, but if you're not recording this went out of the country, when and how. That is the electronic way of telling the government this went out. And then if it's something that is going to come back, then they need that ITN number, which that's a unique number per filing that you will get. And whoever is bringing your things back, if it's a temporary export, they will need that number in order to file. Okay, it went out of the country under this ITN and it's coming back now. So it registers specifically, especially when you have something on a DSP 73 that it goes and comes. And then record keeping, always keep your records.
Mariana, I was going to just jump in and add, because we actually do our own so we can keep track of them. But I think if someone chooses to allow the freight forwarder to do it on their behalf, I would say make sure that you have, the communication with your forwarder, that they're letting you know and showing you copies, right, of the documentations and the information to make sure that they're doing it the right way, because you're still ultimately responsible as the exporter for what they did.
Thanks. And also, if somebody is filing for you, you can still open your ACE account as an importer or as an exporter and check what has been filed under your EIN. Also, in order for you to let anybody else to file an AES for you, you need to give them a power of attorney to do that for you. So you need to make sure that nobody's just using your EIN to say, oh, I'm gonna ship all this under this account. And then if you check and you only had 2 shipments, but 10 show in your account, then you need to worry about, because when the DTC or BIS come to audit you, they're going to be like, okay, you have these 10 shipments, show me the records, and you're going to be not having that information because you did not authorize. So at least you need to make sure that you have what you authorize in record, and if something else is in there, you need to be aware that if anything is happening. So what goes in the commercial pro forma invoice? Basically, everything that you want to know about what you're shipping. And this, again, the commercial pro forma invoice is for physical things, not for technology or not for anything verbally passed. So you need to know the exporter's information, who is sending it, the name, the address, contact information, who is the consignee that you're going to send or it's going to be holding that equipment while it's out of the US, or if that company or person is buying that from you, then they're going to be whoever is having it, or if you are sending it to yourself or to somebody else, you need to know who is going to be having the control of that item in that country. Shipping details, how you're going to be sending it, everything, and you're going to need to have the weight and dimensions and how you're going to be sending it, etc. Product information, it's important. What I have seen many times is when you are so into your product, you usually just say, oh, it's a FLIR. Yes, okay, that's a FLIR. Somebody in customs are gonna be, what is a FLIR? Okay, it's a high-end camera that it's a military grade. Okay, you wanna give a little bit more information when you're typing what your technology is. You wanna make sure that whoever is reading that in customs can identify, okay, this is a camera, this is a radar, this is firearms, which kind of firearm, this is a part for an aircraft, it's a tire. Like, I remember the first time that somebody sent something and said, okay, we're gonna send a nose wheel or a wheel nose, I don't even remember how it's said. I was like, that's great. Is that just a normal tire? Like, what exactly is that? When you're so into your into your product or your area, you need to step back a little bit and make sure that it makes sense to whoever does not know about aircraft or military equipment or anything that you're sending. So they just explained to me, yes, it's the front tire of an aircraft. Okay, well, that makes sense. But you want everybody, whoever does not work in your company and is going to be reviewing your product or your information and your commercial invoice or anything, that they understand. I've been in so many training and with the State Department, and they say, or even with Customs and Border Patrol, and they say, we know what we need to check for, but that does not mean that we know all the products in the world. So be mindful. Not everybody knows your product as well as you do. There should be a little space for notes or additional details. If you're sending a specific aircraft to deliver something to another country and then come back, you want to make as much notes or something that makes sense in your paperwork. So whoever reviews, it makes sense, the reasoning and why you're sending that and how it's being transported and everything. Paying information, if you're sending to somebody else or not, Incoterms, they're important. They want to know who will be paying for the all the fees and everything for that shipment, not just for taking it out of the country, but bringing it into the country. So it's important that you specify if you're going to pay for everything, if you're going to pay half and the buyer the other half, or how you're going to be dealing with. And usually your freight forwarder can help you identify those kind of things if you're not familiar with Incoterms. And then if there's going to be a bank details that you need to send because you're selling something, then you can add as much information as you want into the commercial invoice, but you need to make sure that the specifics, at least for the exports and the details of the product, are there. And usually there's an authorized signature to say, yes, this is real and somebody not just created it for me or just made it up.
So Mariana, one of the attendees, Marvin Maddox, has raised his hand, and I don't know if Marvin has a question or if that was just an error in raising his hand.
I don't know if you guys can give him access to be unmuted so he can let us know if he has a question.
Yeah, Heidi, maybe you can do that. Marvin Maddox is one of the attendees.
While she's looking, Mariana, we have another question. Do all shipments require an export license? They said, I'm sorry if it was already addressed.
So no, and no problem for asking. Not all the shipments require a license. You need to identify what you're sending. Then the process is you go, there's a list that it's called the USML, and everything that is going to be ITAR control is going to be listed in there. If your product is not listed in there, then you go to the commerce control list and see if anything that is, if your product is in there. So let's say I want to ship tables. Well, a table is going to be just a normal table. I'm pretty sure it's going to be an EAR 99. It's not going to be listed in either one or the other. So more likely you don't need any license. Well, you don't need any licenses to ship tables. And things that they are EAR 99, with that denomination, you can ship everywhere except without a license, except to embargoed countries. So if you want to send bottles of water to Canada, to Europe, Africa, anywhere, that's fine. But if you want to send bottles of water to Cuba, I believe you do have to still ask permission. So it all depends. It all depends what your product is and where it's going to understand if we need a license or not. That's when it gets a little bit complicated. And once you get a little bit guidance on what your product is, and it's easier to navigate. But the first time, usually that's how we help clients when they don't know if they need a license or not, and what would they need to do in order to ship to different countries. So you can find anybody that knows about export compliance and ask for help, or yourself try to check on the USML, and if it's not there, check on the Commerce Control List. Now, what you cannot do is to say, I did not know I needed a license, so I exported anyway. Well, that does not fly. So it's important, if you're the responsible party shipping something out of the country or having a deemed export, which that's when somebody from out of the country comes into the US and you're exporting something with showing technology, showing something that is controlled. It's your responsibility to have all the proper paperwork.
Hey, Mariana, I see Marvin's on and unmuted.
Okay.
Yes, my question, you talked earlier on an earlier slide about licensing and the difference between an exception and a, what was it, exception versus exemption?
An exemption.
Yeah, I didn't understand the distinction between those two.
So on the ITAR world, they call them exemptions. And they're listed, for example, if you want to export something because the government is sending you to take this to another country, and you have written direction, you can use an exemption listed as 126.4 B2, for example. That's an exemption. So if you're talking ITAR, it's going to be an exemption. If you're talking EAR, something that is on the Commerce Control List, then it's called exception.
But they're basically the same thing.
It works pretty much the same, but if I say they're the same, somebody from the State Department or BIS are gonna come and say, why are you saying the same? They are different things. That's why they have different names. But for our general webinar, it works the same way.
Okay.
Okay, so let's see. So this is a sample. I break out a sample of a pro forma invoice. So it was a little bit more readable. I have here, for example, on the top, expected date of expected export and expected return. Why? Because we send ITAR control aircraft to train different countries and then they come back. So this is kind of like what we use for that. If you have a different kind of product or a different kind of thing that you're going to be sending, perhaps you don't need to have expected return because you're selling something and it's not going to come back to you, right? But in this case, I usually need it just because it's an information that I like to have added into it. And a commercial and pro forma invoice, you can Google how to get one done. There's many different formats. There's many different ways to do it. But what everything has in common is that you still need to show the important information. Who will be shipping, who will be receiving, which country, what you're sending, how you're sending it. Did you file an AAS? What is the ITN number? Do you have an airway bill? Who is going to be in charge of the product while you're in that, or while the product is in that country? Who will be paying? So all that information that we see here is we always need to have that information when we're shipping something out of the country. And this is for things even that they are not licensable, but I would say anything that you're going to be shipping, you still need to address, as you're going to see, if a license is required or not. So this is kind of like my header. Then I have here the product information and the export statement. So I have here on the left light items, because I want to know how many items I'm sending. Or if I'm sending a box, I put box number 1, so many items. Box number 2, so many items. And then I try to describe. So whoever is reading that can, without opening the box, which they will open or something, know what exactly I'm sending. What is the product name? Who is the manufacturer? What is the part number? Because I can say the part number is 345, but by accident, I sent a different one. Guess what? That's gonna be probably a problem, because then we need to keep track of what we're sending out and what is coming back or not. And we need to make sure our inventory matches, right? So for you and for everybody else, you need to have the right information.
Okay, Mariana, we have 2 more questions.
Sure.
If license is needed, does a company of the license accompany the commercial invoice? How does this information get to CBP?
So when you file the AES.
Yes, does a copy of the license accompany the commercial invoice?
So what we usually do is when we're shipping something, you add into the AES the number of the license, and I usually put a copy of the pro forma or the commercial invoice into my shipment. I usually don't send with the product the copy of the license. I keep the license with me, and if somebody needs to send it and they have my contact or see it, they have my contact information. But if somebody else has a different opinion or why it should be sent, I would like to hear. But that's usually what I do. I keep the license with me and send a copy of the pro forma invoice.
Yeah, same here, Mariana, because again, the only requirement when you do the AES is they need that license number. So they don't ask for a copy of the license to be uploaded.
Yeah.
And then the other question is, does a trusted trader classification apply here?
Can you repeat that one? A trusted trader classification.
Does a trusted trader classification apply here?
I would like to say I know that, but I don't know. Would you know, Shariah?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Ursula asked the question. Ursula, do you have any, I guess, additional question to add to that, or because we're not sure what you're asking?
I don't know, what is a trusted trader?
All right, so we'll follow up with Ursula.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
I don't like answering things that I don't know the answer. I'd rather to say I don't know and I'll figure it out for you rather than giving you the wrong answer. So going back to the pro forma invoice or the commercial invoice, and I'm looking at the time, I'm taking a little bit more time, so I'm gonna try to go a little faster on the rest, but I wanna make sure that everybody follows, and if we need to follow up or something, to have time for that. This is, let me see. Okay. We need to describe, this is very important, that the description, what I was talking about, if I just put, this is an O-ring, I want to know what a O-ring this is. It's a part for an aircraft that helps with this and something that is going to give the other person a knowledge on what exactly that means. Shipping and export control information, you always have to have your HTS code or Schedule P number. One is for imports, one is for exports, but usually they match. And you need to make sure that you have that number, because that is going to be how much taxes or no taxes you're going to be paying. You always have to have your ECCN or ITAR category. If it's something, it's EAR 99, and it says it's going to let's say Panama, then you're going to be like, okay, since it's EAR 99, it does not require a license. And on license number, you put NLR, no license required. So it's important to identify all those things. And also it's important to know the country of origin, because when you're filing through AES, all the information that you have here in your pro forma or commercial invoice, you're going to be inputting that into your AES. So it's important for you to know that in advance, so you're not having all your information. And also for me, I like to know when something is used or new, because sometimes I have the value of something that we bought 5 years ago, and it's not the same when you ship something used or new, because when it comes back, they say, well, did you ship this new and now it's coming used, or is it coming the exact same way that you just took it and it's the exact same thing and it's coming back? So it's important to know. This is kind of like how it looks, my full pro forma invoice when we use it for that specific kind of transaction. This is kind of like the specifics of the AES. AES is the system, as I mentioned before, that we're going to use to report electronic export information. When we filed an AES, if we are sending something that is valued more than $2,500 per Schedule B or HTS code. So if I'm sending, let's say, 3 things, and I have one thing that is HTS code. I'm not going to mention the whole HTS code because it's 10 digits, but it's going to be I'm going to just, for the example, HTS code A, and this is going to be $1,000. And then HTS code B is going to be another $1,000. And the HTS code C, or Schedule B number, is going to be another $1,000. If I send these 3 things all together and they are all EAR, I don't have to file an AES because I'm not sending anything more than $2,500 per Schedule B. However, if they all fall under the same Schedule B number, then the amount of what I'm sending per Schedule B is going to be more than $2,500. Then I do have to file. That is with EAR. With ITAR, anything that you send, it doesn't matter if it costs $5, which I don't think there's anything for $5 on the ITAR, but anything, even if it's under $2,500, you need to report every single time that you export something that it's ITAR controlled through the AES. And this is kind of like how it looks when you file and print your AES. I had to break it into 3 because there were 2 pages and one was longer than the other one. But if you see at the very top, after it says electronic export information, it has an ITN code. That ITN is what you're going to be using, that they are going to identify how was electronically sent or submitted. And if you see in the bottom to the right, it says, okay, I send an inverter. This is the export control information, the HTS code, the ECCN, license number. It says NLR, no license required. So everything is identified on that final paper once you filed your AES. Maintaining records. We already talked about, it's important to do it. You need to keep it at least for 5 years. It doesn't matter if you want to keep paper copies or if you want to keep everything electronically, as long as you can produce it when you need it, you need to have it somehow. And then last but not least, export compliance management program. If you export, you need to make sure you have a program in place for export compliance. That export compliance, you can look for guidance under the ITAR or under the EAR. You can go to both websites, to State Department or BIS, and you're gonna find some guidance. they both don't tell you, you need to start with this, you need to do it this way. What they say, each company is different, and you just need to make sure you address a couple important things. One important thing is a management commitment letter. Let's say you are the person in charge of exports, but the president of the company does not care about export compliance, and he just says, go ahead or do this or do that. The management commitment letter means it's a letter signed by the president or CEO of the company saying, basically, I care about following the law, and I want to make sure that all my employees know that we're going to comply with the export law. And if they have any questions, they need to ask these questions to me, to the export compliance person, or to somebody specific that knows a little bit more about the law in order to export something. So that's kind of like what the management commitment letter says. Risk assessment, you need to identify what are your things that can cause you to maybe break the law. Because, oh, we need to usually ship really fast and we cannot wait on the license. Well, if that is something that you normally see, you want to address that. You want to have it on, you want to do your assessment and say, what can put me on risk? What is it going to be there that I need to make sure? So it's good to audit yourself, which that's another part, and identify what is going to help you in order to become better. Export authorization, you need to understand if your product is licensable or not, if you need an authorization in order to export it or not. You need to follow the record keeping requirements. It's important for your employees and for you to know that there are export violation and corrective actions if something happens. So sometimes I've seen different companies that says, if you break their export compliance law, you're going to be fined, or you can be fired, or you can have this. So people take it seriously and don't just say, oh, whatever, it's just a letter that I signed, but really it doesn't matter. Like, it matters. We need to follow the law. So this all, you can have it and that's what it says, build and maintain manual. You can have a manual. It can be as small as you want, as long as you identify those couple things, or you can, I've seen companies that have it really big, as long as it's something that if somebody has a question or how to export, you address it there. You identify, okay, who is going to be the person in charge of exports, who is going to be handling when we have a foreign visitor, who is going to be handling when we have certain things to address, what happens if there's a risk involved on this. So you need to have a little export compliance manual on how you handle all this program. And you need to have training. I don't think I put here audit, but auditing is another important part. And you need to make sure that you have training. If you can perhaps train once a year your whole company, and then focus and more often to train the people that they are going to be dealing with the exports, that's great. You need to make sure that you explain to your co-workers or to your employees or whoever you're going to be dealing with, to make sure they understand that and what an export is and what needs to happen. Even if they don't need to know how to do it, to know, hey, this is going to be going out of the country, or somebody out of the country is coming. They need to know to find you because you're the person that is trained to deal with this. So with that, we go to the Q&A, and I'm sorry, I already went 10 minutes more than the time. So I understand if people need to disconnect. However, if you guys want to stay for the Q&A, I'm totally happy to keep going until everybody or all the questions are addressed.
Okay, I don't see any questions currently in the Q&A.
Maybe because we were addressing it during it.
Oh, here's one. Hold on, let's see. Oh, it just says thank you.
Uh,
Marianne, I guess I do have a question, I guess, for clarification, because I may look at it a little bit differently as it relates to the AES submission, right? So I've always been of the mind and thought that no matter the value, right, of the product, if it required an export license, and this is even in the BIS world, no matter the value, if it required an export license, then I was going to make sure that I did that AES submission. So I really didn't apply that $2,500 rule when I was dealing with a licensable product, right? So I think I still treated it as I need to report this.
Yes, if it's a licensable product, I definitely would file an AES.
And no matter the value, right?
Well, if you go into the regulations of when it's to be filed, it specifies only about, if it's an ITAR, it specifies if it's an ITAR control item, you need to file it no matter if it's licensable or not. So if I send under an exemption and I'm not using a license, I still need to file. If it's something that it's licensable under EAR, usually under the EAR, when you're sending something under a low value, you can use exceptions, so you don't need a license many times. So I would say it depends what you're sending and the amount. I would double check, but if you read the regulation, it's going to say if it's ITAR control, file it. If it's not ITAR, then anything under 2,500 per Schedule B. Now, we can go ahead and talk a little bit more of that AES filing for half hour or more, because let's say if you're shipping to Canada, you can have an exemption and you don't have to file an AES if you have the proper documentation, but you need to understand what entails that before using it and say, oh, it's Canada, I don't need to send it. Well, it all depends. It depends if then from there it's going to go somewhere else, or if it's just coming back or staying there. So there's a little bit more to understand, but I definitely would suggest, if you're going to get into shipping your product, go and research your product and see, identify the requirements on filing AES for that specific product. Mm-hmm. And if you have any questions, just send me an email, or call and say, hey, I was in this webinar and I have this question. Please guide me, and I'll be happy to talk with you.
Mariana, a couple of questions. Can you share your email address with people?
Yes, absolutely. It was not here. I thought it would be here, but
Heidi has it on the other slide. So if you stop sharing, she can share the last slide.
Okay, sounds good. I will go to stop sharing. There we go. There you go. Sam Rutherford at kiosk.com. And that usually comes directly into my phone. Phone number, I always have it with me. So my cell phone. So if anybody has something, I usually respond. Even if I cannot respond in that moment, I say, I got your email, I'll respond in a couple of days, or I'll respond tomorrow or something. If somebody has any questions or concerns, or want to shoot me a suggestion or anything.
Okay, so I think at this point, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. So thank you all for your attendance. And again, here's Mariana's information, Rutherford at kiosk.com, her phone number and her company's web address for you to go and check it out. Also, my contact information is there. Please feel free to contact us if you have any further questions at the end of this webinar. And also, we want to let you know, and just of an upcoming webinar that we're having on freight disruption in the global supply chain, that will be held on Wednesday, July the 11th at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So that registration information will also be posted on the National Dex website. So please feel free to join that webinar as well. And we thank you for your time.
Thank you, everybody.